it's fantastic to have someone on the call today who has been going through all the fun stuff we've all seen so far. And I've got the one and only Rebecca Powell on the line. Rebecca, how are you doing today?
Hey Ben, I am good, thank you. And first of all, can I just compliment you on your lovely top? I'm, yeah, Melbourne Rugby. Wow, what can I say about Melbourne Uni Rugby? They just set the bar really high.
Leave us alone. We haven't won a championship since 1967, but we'll get there eventually, which is fine. So, yes, this video today will be very rugby themed, considering we're both diehard rugby tragics. So, yeah, it's going to be a fun old time. So, for those of you who remember what we used to do with ThisIsBS, we used to start off asking some questions. But I want to get straight into Becky yourself. So, why don't you give everyone a bit of an understanding of kind of what you've been doing, what you previously and what you're doing now during these crazy times.
Yep, cool. All right. Well, for those who don't know me, I am Irish and been living in Australia for 11 years now and became a citizen just before everything shut down. Yay me! Proud moment. So I've been working in recruitment or talent acquisition for 13 years, lucky for some, and moved from agency in Ireland. I worked for a couple of agencies over here when I first came over. And then moved in-house with Sportsbet, doing talent acquisition, then moving into internal comms and engagement. And then most recently, I was the TA manager for BetEasy. So doing the end-to-end talent acquisition, doing all the employer branding stuff. So working with you, Ben, on producing some content for BetEasy. And yeah, now I unfortunately find myself in the situation like quite a few others, of being redundant at a time when, life can be a bit challenging for a lot of people. But to be honest, I've decided not to dwell on that. I've decided to look forward. I've been very fortunate throughout my career to have a lot of support from great managers and mentors. So rather than rushing back into the job market myself, I thought I'd take the foot off the gas and get involved with Jobs for Australia, which is a not-for-profit organisation comprising people like myself, so TA managers or leaders and HR leaders as well. And what we're doing is we're helping to empower job seekers to get the tools and resources they need to help them with their job search.
We've kind of covered what you've done and stuff like that, and now we're going to move into the actual BSs. And I think those of you who haven't seen this before, Rebecca's going to give a couple of points, and by the end of it, we're going to give some suggestions on how we can go about improving it. It's not about just sitting here and ranting about what's bad. It's about adding some value, seeing what we can do to help ourselves, whether it be as one person or an entire business. So without further ado, Bex, why don't you start off with what your first BS is?
Right, my first BS, and I don't want to harp on about COVID or anything like that, but one of the things I've noticed as a job seeker myself is I'm finding that a lot of companies are using COVID as an excuse for bad behavior, and that is not okay. And yeah, so what kind of bad behavior? All right, so for example, not responding and getting back to people when they've applied. I've interviewed for a few jobs and I've been waiting weeks for feedback. Not cool. That's bullshit. Are we allowed to say bullshit, or can I say bollocks?
Of course we can. We can say whatever we like.
Excellent. Now is actually the time for companies to be looking at ways to improve their candidate experience. You've got time on your hands. This is a no-brainer. Other examples of the bad behavior, we've moved from being in a candidate-driven market where, as you said, Ben, you'd have maybe 20, 30 people applying for a job. Now you've got 60, 100, crazy numbers applying for one position. And one of the things I've noticed is that companies, first of all, are starting to drop salaries. And secondly, they're increasing the level of expectation in that role, yet dropping, not including a salary that actually meets that standard. So for example, I recently applied for a talent acquisition manager role for a company that will remain nameless, but suddenly they've changed the job to be a specialist role. So all the accountabilities and responsibilities remain the same. They want someone to do a managerial level position, but they're not actually going to pay for it. Bollocks.
Okay. What I want to kind of hone in on that particular point is actually something which I find fascinating about the nature of the not getting back to you or the stuff like that. Do you think that perhaps people are utilizing the COVID sort of thing as an excuse to kind of lax off on their current role and kind of blame the nature of what we're going through right now? Or is it the case of just simply being, just saying, I don't have the time or I'm too busy? Do you think it's one of those two schools of thought?
Look, I think yes is the short answer. I do think a lot of people are using it as an excuse. Now, at the same time, when I gave the example of suddenly the volume of applications for one job skyrocketing, it can be tough for people just to deal with the volume coming through. But again, frankly, it's a bit of a bad excuse because there's so much technology available within the talent acquisition community that can allow you to process and get through these volumes fairly quickly.
Okay, so just as a point there, so you talk about the technology that comes into it. Is there potentially a situation where people are not essentially utilizing technology in a certain way to kind of actually combat this because they're so used to the old school way of like CV comes in, yes or no, tick box, on your way, first interview. Now they have to change up their style of doing things like this a lot of the time. Do you think that's also a contributing factor to that?
Yeah, I think people are I think there's a concern that people need to look busy. And the trouble is when you're looking busy, you're working harder, not smarter. And I think the challenge is that they're afraid of change in a time that is just riddled with change. And I think if I do change one more thing, I might lose my mind. And I think there is an element of that. For people who, like in my last role, I was a standalone TA person. So I didn't have that much tech available to me. So I get that there are smaller companies who legitimately can't afford to use the tech or invest in tech and who literally are overwhelmed simply by volume. So absolutely, I don't want to imply that I'm just sort of whitewashing the whole thing. It's not a blank canvas of blame. But there are plenty of larger organizations, and it's the larger ones that I've noticed in particular have been dropping the ball, where some simple coaching and training, because I know they have the resources, just looking at how to use their tech a little bit more smartly. Things like bulk communications, even if you have to forego the personal touch, the way you might have embraced pre-COVID. Fact is, some sort of communication to your candidates, even if it's just as a, sorry, we're keeping you in limbo, but this is what we're dealing with. There's so many simple little tweaks and hacks that they could utilize to make a more engaging experience, even calling it out and sending a comms going, this is the volume, this is the time frame, simple things like that.
If you were to say, let's take an example there. If you were to give one suggestion to these big businesses that are essentially playing the game in the shadows or whatever it may be, what would be a suggestion you might make? And the first thing you might do if you walked in the door and got to sit down with them, what would be the thing that you would suggest to make their experience more candidate-centric?
I'd get them to all apply for a job in that company and actually replicate the candidate journey for themselves, because I can almost guarantee you none of them have done it. And actually go through every step that a candidate goes through, all of those touch points, and look at how each touch point makes them feel and what was the response that they were expecting. I did it myself at Bed Easy. I hadn't done it in ages, and I actually did it about 18 months into my role. Changed all of my communications to candidates as a result.